Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dorm Ventures. Today, I'm joined by Rick Gilchrist, a seasoned entrepreneur with 17 startups under his belt and several successful exits. As the founder and CEO of Vannadium, Rick is pioneering the use of blockchain and Web3 technology to champion data sovereignty. In this episode, Rick shares his insights on the significance of having a North Star, the value of mentorship, and understanding the broader landscape of entrepreneurship. With his extensive experience, Rick offers invaluable advice on building as a student, leveraging resources, and avoiding common pitfalls. Listen, if you're a student eager to lay a strong foundation for your startup journey, this episode is a must listen for you. All right, enough talking. Let's dive right in. Hope you all enjoy. Rick, thank you so much for hopping on Dormant Ventures. Really excited for this episode.
Yeah, likewise. I'm excited that I get to actually talk about a couple different things as it relates to not only what I'm doing and Vannadium's doing, but by way of Ben Morin, and a Hokie of yours that really saw a connection on what we can do to contribute to that ecosystem. I'm excited.
Definitely, yeah. Actually, I had an episode with Ben Morin prior, and so it was great that he was able to make this connection for the podcast because I think, from just a little chat we had before this episode, I think your experiences could bring a lot of insight, specifically for college students that are the predominant majority of our listeners. So you actually just mentioned it. I want to hear a little bit more about Vannadium, which is what you're currently working on, and just everything about it. How has it been? How did you start it?
Well, so there's a long story, and I don't think you have 3 hours, but I'm a 17-time entrepreneur. I've had 17 startups that don't even include the startups that I was part of inside of two Fortune 500 companies. And whether I co-founded, founded, or managed, everything's been rather unique over the last 30 plus years. I was kind of born almost like into entrepreneurship because of my dad, but it was all about identifying problems and solving that problem. From the time I was, 5, 6 years old and finding golf balls on the golf course and then selling them back to the golfers on the 14th green because they lost all of their balls by then. It was solving a problem, finding a market fit, and being able to profit off of it too. That kind of like followed me through my entire life, whether it was, solving a problem to make, an income. It was learning how to triage at a very young age, finding odd jobs in my neighborhood and then paying my friends to do the odd jobs and then triaging that, again, solving another problem. So, early on, I learned a lot about how the business side and the invention side don't always connect. And in college, I started a company called Small Business Solutions, where I did kind of the same triage effect of what I did when I was in junior high and high school. And I'd pay my fellow classmates that were SC, MC, PA, computer engineers, whatever it was, I'd pay them $25 an hour. I'd bill them out at $65 an hour to local area businesses. And we eroded market share from the closest competitor by, probably 30, 40%. And, I learned a lot about that, even to the point where I sold the business. And in selling that business, I completely undervalued my company. And I didn't have the right data to, properly vet and understand what that actually meant. And I was just fortunate that the individual that I sold my company to, which actually was a very large company, ended up being a mentor of mine for about 14 years. And 3 days after we inked that deal, he said, I would have paid 5 times more for your company. And while I don't want to take away from the fact that you had an exit, um, I want you to learn from this experience. And for me, that was, the best kind of learning I could do, a lot more than an MBA could have ever done for me. And that was that practical hands-on learning of, you don't know what you don't know. And you need to learn how the best of the best do it as well. Because so many people start up, their company in a garage or in a dorm room or, in their bedroom and thinking, hey, I'm going to, be the next Steve Jobs, not having a basis for how business works or how to scale a company or the idea of failing as fast as you can so you can continue on with the journey to solve that problem or hit your North Star. So when you ask me how I started Vanadium, it's all a buildup of the other startups that I had over time. And while I had, five of those startups being very, very successful, of the other 12, that is where I got all my real experience. Building teams, scaling to meet market demand or pent up demand, and understanding how you can build the coolest technology, but if nobody's going to use it, what's the point? And there's a big difference between being an inventor and an entrepreneur. Going back probably 11, 12 years, I was a co-founder of a company called New Frontier Data. And we were actually tackling big problems within the legal cannabis industry. We were collecting, aggregating, and normalizing data from both public and non-public sources. And when you looked at the data over time, we saw data changing. And data really shouldn't change unless you know why it's changing. It shouldn't start drifting. And that's really when I started realizing having provenance of data and data sovereignty was so important. And blockchain was still really new back then. And when most people hear of blockchain, they think of cryptocurrency. And we have to really explain to people that cryptocurrency in crypto itself, that's just a use case for using blockchain. So, there were a lot of opportunities to kind of look at the industry on whole and understand how do we solve for this? And I actually installed key logging software on 11 different multi-state operators, and we collected data over a period of 90 days. And we actually saw over $100,000 in losses per month per location, and that's over $3.3 million in losses. But it took 6 months to analyze that data. And that's really when the first idea came to me of utilizing blockchain as a solution for highly regulated compliant industries. So that's actually is, kind of the origins of how we came up with Vanadium and the solutions we want to solve for. And that was establishing data sovereignty for data, whether you're a person or an enterprise, the ability to secure that data, the ability to transmit that data securely and share it permissively, to remove the permissions for that data without any kind of residual data, and to transact with it in real time. There were lots of companies that were doing very innovative things, but you were always giving up something, whether it was security or speed or cost or energy. So there's all of these different intricacies of utilizing a blockchain-based solution and having that real time. And we were able to come up with a brand new way of handling data, removing algorithmic load balancing, reducing the cost per transaction, increasing the speed and the security, and not sacrificing anything. And this is where I get even more excited because we can apply this to AI. We can apply this to digital content. We can apply it to data being originated directly from everything from medical telemetry to drones and black box data. So, like I said, it's a long journey to get where we have with Vanadium, but it's a build out.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like a long journey. And that's so important, the whole idea of data sovereignty, just because in this day and age, everything is data. There's data everywhere, and it plays this part in every facet and every vertical of business that we're talking. It's so important that people are able to own their own data. And it sounds a lot like, like you mentioned yourself, this whole idea was a culmination of just so many different experiences that you've gone throughout your entire journey. And it sounds like all of these experiences have played their own part in this bigger picture that you call your vision, or for the lack of a better word, your North Star. And I want to talk a little bit about that. What does the idea of a North Star mean to you? The idea of what you're working towards, and how have your past experiences shaped that over time?
It's a great question, and I love the framework around what a North Star is for that matter. This recently came up because I actually had an investor group do personal due diligence on me. And they said, if your startup failed today, what would you do? And my first response is, the mission hasn't changed. It may be a different vehicle that gets me there, but my mission hasn't changed. And that's really the North Star that's driving me. And that is, to truly establish both personal and global data sovereignty and be the first standalone data company. Because so many of these companies that are predicated on data, they're not standalone. They're influenced by government, they're influenced by ownership, they're influenced by all sorts of different things. And if Vanadium failed today, that North Star would not change for me. And whether it's through a different mechanism or a different company or a different team, I would still be in pursuit of solving those problems and maintaining my direction to that North Star. I think it's great that some people can invent some amazing things, but is that invention part of a North Star or is it because you're a creator? Is that new content or that new device or that hardware or that programming, is that solving a problem or is it just really cool stuff you're hoping somebody's going to buy? And that's really what changes or establishes the difference between an inventor, a wantrepreneur, and an entrepreneur.
Definitely. And I think that's just such an important topic to discuss just because from my personal experience being directly in, the college experience and specifically looking into the entrepreneurial space here for college students, a lot of people have lost that idea of what it means to have that North Star. You just mentioned what would happen if Vanadium failed today. The mission itself wouldn't change. However, we have a lot of people and a lot of entrepreneurs in today's day and age that if their current venture were to fail, they would try to figure out a whole different new start to look at, a whole different mission, a whole different problem to solve. And it becomes this idea where it's just, you don't have this line that's keeping you down a road. You're just kind of jumping from one spot to the other. Do you think that that leads to problems, you yourself having experience in the entrepreneurial world?
Yeah. Um, Pivot is sometimes a bad word. People are so used to the idea of pivot and iterate. An iteration, micro pivots, all of those things are absolutely 100% the way you should always be thinking. Like your way is not necessarily going to be the right way to solve the problem. But I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs go from one idea of solving this problem to completely new industry, a new North Star. And at that point, it's not a North Star. It's, hey, I may be able to identify another problem that I can solve. Well, what made you stop wanting to solve the problem that you already identified? How committed are you to solving these problems? And understandably so, sometimes solving those problems are about timing. We look at like, the Newton. The Newton came out, 8 years before it should have, and that was all about timing. Had Newton come out when we were all ready with the technology and the ability to have that connectivity, we'd all be holding Newtons instead of iPhones. Uh, but again, they both solved the problem, and that's what turned into the iPhone. Younger people that are getting into the idea of entrepreneurship, and they're learning from a class. I love it when a class is taught by another entrepreneur, somebody that has also failed, not been successful. Because again, it's those failures that you're going to learn how to really become an entrepreneur, not from the successes. If I didn't listen to my first mentor, there's no way I think I would have been successful with any other endeavor. Understanding that, pride and ego have to be pushed out of the way. There's time for confidence, no question. And being cocky about, your company, your team, your product, it has to be in there a little bit. You have to have that kind of confidence to back it up, but not to the fault of pride or ego. And I think that's one thing that's lost on a lot of people because they see so many people becoming successful. And I say so many in quotes there because there aren't that many unicorns anymore. This is not the era of the dot coms. And with AI, people are starting to understand, well, you did have some unicorns within AI, but not every company that comes out as an AI company is going to be that. And there's a big misunderstanding of starting a new AI company and thinking that they're going to be the next biggest one. if you understand things like market analysis, you understand the total addressable market, the serviceable market, and who the biggest players are out there, you need to be able to look around corners. You need to be able to actually understand what happens in a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, as everybody else, struggles to either catch up or they've eclipsed you based upon tech instead of solving the problem.
Hmm. Yeah, like you said, it comes down to just really knowing how to solve your specific problem. And it's more than just looking at how can I use AI to make something that looks cool, but it's more about how can I solve this problem in respects to the entire context of how the market's looking. And one thing you mentioned that I think is really important is this idea of learning from your failures. How you yourself stated that you learn more from your failures than your successes. And I want to hear from you because, in conjunction with this idea of learning from failures and your North Star, when you're following your North Star and you're working on a solution and it doesn't end up working, and you stick with that North Star and you work on a solution, doesn't end up working, where is that line drawn at the point where you say, listen, this North Star is great, but it's not really about learning from my failures at this point. It's more about jumping to something new.
The idea of fish or cut bait.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's why I say fail fast and fail hard if you can, because you know you then know whether or not there are other ways of accomplishing that. And like I said, like sometimes it's about timing, sometimes it's about the team too. And if you can't have a team around you that can execute, you're only one person, and you don't know what you don't know unless you fill the room with people that are smarter than you. And where I know a lot of people will say, you know, Rick is this, Rick is that, talk about the lexicon I use or my experience or what I do and know about everything related to AI or blockchain. But I look for people that are going to bring me up to the next level. I look for the team members that know more about this area in marketing or in growth or in sales or in partnership development. If I predicated the way we built the Vanadium architecture on my programming skills, we wouldn't be here. The the success of our tech has everything to do with having an amazing engineering team. And my senior engineer, I could not have done this without him. And while I may be on the patents, there's a reason why we've got like such an all-star team that's brought us to this point. So I'm going a little off path with this to answer your question, and that is to say, when do you know that you have to start back over again or move to a new project? It's really when you've exhausted your ability to see what can be done. Because I truly believe in the self-fulfilling prophecy. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're absolutely right. And for me, I keep that positive attitude and pragmatism closely aligned. And even if I move to another startup, I'm still trying to solve this other problem. I may downgrade it from doing 99% of my time down to 10% of my time. But I truly believe that time will come where that 10% can go back up to 90 or 100%. And that's exactly what happened with Vanadium. Because back in 2017, that's when I came up with the original abstract of solving this with blockchain. That's when I came up with the idea of certain technologies being able to be used to offer a token that would also go with automated AI, machine learning, and data sovereignty. But back then, there was no technology, and I didn't know the right people that could actually take my architecture and turn it into a real solution. Fast forward 4 years later, after I wrote that, I had the right people. So, had I started Vanadium when I first came up with the idea, it would have failed. But in the process, I learned more by co founding a telemedicine company, working with a remote patient monitoring application that required access to patient medical records, a multinodal storage environment for storing PHI and HIPAA related data that could be accessible to different audiences permissively. And all of those are now part of the Vanadium solution.
So it's just small parts of a bigger picture. That's fantastic. And it's only, I guess looking at each thing individually, you can't really tell what the bigger picture is until you put it all together. And it goes into what you're talking about, just the idea, the only time to really move to a new project is once you've exhausted all your abilities and resources to solve whatever you're looking at. And even then, as you mentioned, you still want to solve it. And that strikes me because being in a space where that's completely different, I don't know what your take is on this. I feel like, this idea of startups and entrepreneurship in general becoming a sort of get rich quick kind of space. I feel like that's completely skewed where people's focuses are on why they build companies, and it's not so much about a purpose about solving a problem. It's just, how can I get this in front of clients as quick as I can? How can I get as much money as I can in the smallest amount of time? Is that how you feel about it?
Yeah, it's so so this is where I like mentoring and advising, especially young entrepreneurs, because I've dedicated every one of my startups, especially the ones that I've been the founder or co-founder of, is profits with a purpose. There's nothing wrong with wanting to make money, and God, we all want to do it. It helps us live our lives well. It lets us do the things we want to do, whether that's start a family or for me, I after Vanadium is, been successful, I would want to start my own impact fund. I still want to solve all these other problems out there. Um, but the whole thing that you were just talking about that's very key is that it's not a get rich quick thing. It's not cryptocurrency. It's not some, immediate investment that you're going to see your 10x in 5, 6 months. Now, there are those instances where that could happen, but it's highly unlikely. If you can actually put together a roadmap of one, how you define success, and you back into that. People say, "Hey, Rick, tell me about your exits." I said, "Well, actually, I've already thought about that with Vanadium. I know in 5 years where I believe we will be, and what do I need to do to accomplish that? I know where we'll be in 3 years, and what do I need to do to accomplish that? And whether that's user acquisition, that is our technical development, those are our partners, those are our revenue goals within that all of that." So all of those things end up being a little bit more cohesive when you can put that roadmap together and get away from the idea that you're just going to deploy an idea and it's going to be bought tomorrow.
Hmm. And kind of diving into that point about building this roadmap, specifically for college students who may not have that experience with building roadmaps like these for such ambitious projects that they may be working on, how would you recommend, or how would you personally advise, let's say, a college student who just came up with an idea that they feel passionate, that aligns with their North Star? How would you recommend they go about building that roadmap to ensure that they can see the bigger picture of this?
Yeah. So this is applicable for anybody, even somebody that's not going to college. They just have that great idea. You start putting things down on paper. You start thinking, okay, here is the cool solution I have. Here's the problem it solves. Those are obviously two very key things to start off with. If you don't have the problem you're solving and why people are going to use it, and then the potential idea of the solution or prototype, alpha, beta, whatever it is, then you really can't start anything else out. Um, there's so many tools out here now, though, that you can use to establish basic roadmaps. You know, when it comes down to it, I looked for a mentor. I looked for advisors. I looked for people that were, subject matter experts in the field or the vertical or the horizontal for the problem that I wanted to solve. And for me, I joke my secret power is building, real good teams. It's because I identify where people can help me be successful and can drive success for solving that problem. So finding that mentor, finding that person that's had some of that experience, um, is key in establishing how do I get to where they did too. It may not be the same, but how did they do it? And asking for advice is some of the best advice I can give to somebody too. There are tools though. I mean, like there's so many AI tools right now, but you got to be really careful about what you put into those AIs because you don't want that to get out in the public. You want to make sure you've got your own private system in which you're inputting details of your IP or what you're solving for, or how you're going to solve it. Um, a lot of these AI systems are sitting on brittle and siloed data systems, and you don't want that out there. But those tools can help you establish baseline roadmaps. You know, like, hey, help me establish milestones to get me to point Z. Do I have to go through A through Z to get there, or can I take different routes to get there? And having those alternative solutions and understanding your own time frame for doing it is extremely important, especially if you're finishing school. You want to dedicate a certain amount of time to, finishing classes, getting your degree, but I'm also at the same time starting this process. I'm not going to be able to do it all on my own, most likely. If I can, then it's going to be a smaller exit. It's going to be a smaller addressable market because you as an individual are not scalable without utilizing tools like AI. So, my biggest piece of advice is find a mentor or advisor. Utilize tools that will protect your ideas, like certain AI systems, and make sure you pay for it so your inputs don't become somebody else's solutions. And write things down. Um, the biggest game changer for me, I got a Remarkable notebook.
Mhm.
Instead of having just stacks and stacks and stacks of yellow pads like I did before, I got a Remarkable. I wrote things down. I was able to recall them, take it with me everywhere I went, had it in my backpack all the time, and I could really consume my information very quickly right in front of me instead of going back to those stacks of papers.
Right. Yeah, and going into one of those points you just mentioned about mentorship in general, how would you recommend, I guess it's kind of breaking it down to two parts. How would you recommend someone first figures out who they need to speak to in terms of who they should be looking for a mentor? And then how should they go about actually finding that mentor?
Yeah, so in college, it's funny. I purposely went and took a job with the alumni group for it was alumni donations. So I got on the phone cold calling alumni for Purdue University and understanding how big the alumni association was, besides of just what was happening on campus. And some people were like, "Oh yeah, you're one of those call center folks," and all I could think of was I'm increasing my network is what I'm doing. I'm understanding who is part of this amazing opportunity around, Purdue University. Um, it was the same thing when I did grad school. I didn't go to grad school necessarily for the education. I went there for the network, and to increase that network. It's true what a lot of people say, your network is your net worth. And being able to leverage into that, understand how you can give into that ecosystem because you're going to get back whatever you put in. I can guarantee you that. Um, it's just understanding how you start integrating yourself into the networks that are available to you. As a student, there are so many more opportunities now than there were when I was in college. But, getting into, the clubs, there's entrepreneur clubs now, there's business clubs, even through sports. And, I look now at the people that are now investors in my company or that have been part of my advisory groups. They're people that I met 30 plus years ago, and there are people that I met 1 year ago. And so take advantage of what's right in front of you. And at Virginia Tech, you guys have amazing groups here, not only on the entrepreneur side and the business side, but as far as alumni goes too. Those that are part of the Greek life, that that is absolutely enormous. You can go to LinkedIn, look at other people that were part of SAE or FICAP or any of those, and that becomes an extension of your network by leveraging LinkedIn with your current student groups. Once you do that, you do need to you need to realize that you need to start networking. And for an introvert, that can be really hard. So smaller groups are a lot helpful. Finding a partner, take a partner with you to those networking um, events it's great because it becomes lower pressure. Like if you and I were at a networking event and both of us were a little introverted, it's very easy to say, "Hey, have you met my friend Zachy?" And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden, that's the conversation starter for somebody else and you. So that's a great way to get over like the shyness or the introvertedness of being in a group for the first or second or even third time. And then you become very much able to at least start the conversations and understand why other people are there too. And it's about asking questions, not talking the entire time, which is probably a little bit the opposite of what I'm doing right now. But I think it's important for people to listen.
Definitely. Yeah, 100%. And, one in regards to networking, one great thing that I've personally learned in my experiences is that people love to help students. You know, a lot of times either they see themselves in that student or they see the amazing opportunity that that student has. And given that they're kind of fresh into this new world, whether you're looking into business, the corporate world, entrepreneurship, really anything, people are eager to help students. And so to all fellow students, you have that leg up. And I think that's a great, resource to use and to leverage when you go into, your alumni networks or really anywhere to start networking. And so, Rick, I want
I could give
to
you an example of something
go
that's
ahead.
absolutely perfect to tell you about this. I was very fortunate that I went to the Accelerate conference at George Mason University last week, and lots of student entrepreneurs that were pitching, and a lot of them you could tell were not comfortable yet. Maybe their first or second time ever pitching. They had great ideas, but they were still students. And one individual in particular, named Joggin, came up to me at the mixer right afterwards, and he introduced himself, immediately put himself out there to say, "I was one of the presenting companies today. What did you think?" And unfortunately, I had missed a session, but he said, "I would love some advice for somebody that's just getting out there right now, somebody that hasn't yet gotten into any of these groups, but we have market validation, we have a good product, we have started some partnerships, and we had a really good conversation. He was extremely respectful of my time, making sure to only take up a few minutes. He then asked me if he could follow up with me directly, and then asked me if I'd be willing to consider being a mentor. And he gave me his asks. He managed my expectations. He was respectful of my time, and he followed up within 48 hours to thank me once again and to see if he could get back on my calendar. Like that was almost picture textbook perfect of how to go after the individual you're looking for to be an advisor or a mentor.
Definitely. Well, listen, Rick, thank you so much. This was some amazing insight into the whole world of finding your North Star, figuring out how to leverage networks and everything in between, especially for college entrepreneurs that are really at the beginning stages who could really use that advice to kick off their journey. So I really appreciate it once again. And thank you so much for sharing all your insights. I know our listeners would love to hear this, and I'm preparing myself for the great feedback. So thank you so much once again.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm glad I could be a part of this, and hopefully we can do it again.
Of course, open anytime. Well, Rick, thank you so much. I appreciate it once again, and have an amazing rest of your day.
Thanks. You too.
All right, that's it for my conversation with Rick. And before we close out, per usual, I want to leave you all with a few key takeaways from our discussion. So, starting off, having a robust North Star is essential, right? As Rick emphasized, it's important to have a clear mission guiding your journey, but also to know when it's time to pivot and adjust your direction to stay aligned with your goals. Second, networking is vital. And listen, if you're introverted, bring a friend along. This can help ease the pressure and make introductions smoother, expanding your opportunities and resources. And lastly, the importance of mentorship cannot be overstated. A mentor provides invaluable guidance and insights, helping you navigate the challenges of entrepreneurship and align with your industry goals. All right, that's all for this week's episode. For anyone interested, I've attached Rick's LinkedIn and the link to Vannadium in the show notes. Once again, thank you all so much for tuning in, and until next time, this is Dorman Ventures.